but the edited version will go on later. So
Okay.
anybody who's watching this now, ignore all of the stuff in the beginning and the end. It will be a beautiful edited version later. Um, but this is just for people who now ignore. Yeah, there we go. Okay, awesome. Got it. Okay, so hi, welcome. I'm so glad to see you.
Yeah, it's super exciting to be here. And I love the topic we're talking about today, the neuroscience of success. So this is like my
Neuroscience.
favorite topic. So I'm really excited to talk about it.
I'm excited too. I want to do a quick intro for those people who are not aware of who you are and all of the great things that you do. This is Dr. Shimi Kang. She's an award-winning Harvard-trained doctor, researcher, media expert, best-selling author, and speaker. Her 3 award-winning books have captured the attention of people seeking out advice about everything from raising self-motivated kids to how to better motivate themselves. And she has the tech diet. You have the tech diet that's out there too. And she's here today to help us understand the neuroscience of success. Now, I do want to say one quick thing. I am kind of a fangirl of Dr. Kang here because I saw Shimi in action at the American Society Association Executives Great Ideas Conference this year. And it was in Colorado Springs. Blew everyone away with her keynote. So of course I had to go and see her in action afterwards at the breakout session. The audio visual stuff, there was this terrible thing that happened where none of the slides, nothing, it was like every speaker's worst nightmare, right? And for at least half of her time, she spoke extemporaneously and answered questions from people who had seen the keynote and answered questions from people who were just interested in the topic. And several people afterwards were just really blown away by the fact that she was able to do this and impressed by the fact that it was probably even more interesting because it was something that was so engaging and interactive and was done extemporaneously like that. So that is all to say that I'm very impressed by this person before us today. And welcome.
Thank you so much, Kiki. I appreciate that intro. And I think that was, I think that example of how everything went wrong in the AV, but in the end, people, and I loved that session too. It kind of gets to my point that one of the keys of success is actually the ability, or at least the effort to turn lemons into lemonade, meaning that, there's always going to be issues in life. Every cloud does have a silver lining. If you just keep trying to work at it. And I think in the end of the day, people do really value effort, and even if the performance isn't 100%, the effort and heart behind it, I think really can hit people. So I'm glad that you remembered that. And it was every speaker's worst nightmare, but in the end, we were able to turn lemons into lemonade, all of us together. And, we know this research shows that when we look at success, that's a key part of it.
Yes. Well, I mean, it was wildly impressive. And I even dug out, you won't believe this, but there was a postcard that was handed out during the keynote, which was the what do you want to remember from this? And at the top of the postcard, it says, now that you know that empathy is one path to great ideas, what are you going to do about it? And you could self-address these and turn them in at the end. And we got these reminders like a month later, I think. And I keep mine on my desk because it reminds me of what I said I was going to do. And so I've been looking forward to our discussion today for quite some time. And I know that you have so much great guidance and knowledge to share with people. And so it's going to be really hard to capture everything that I want to talk about. So we might have to divide it into several visits from you. But for today, I thought if we could just do a sort of an overview of maybe what people don't know about the neuroscience of success that is maybe some of the newest information that's come out, um, to share how we can better connect with success in ways that maybe we haven't been familiarized with in the past.
Yeah, I think that sounds fantastic. And I think combining the latest neuroscience research with a lot of the kind of ancient ideas, I think really what I find really amazing is the further we go in the science, or the further I go into the science, the more these ideas are affirmed, and we'll talk about it today, but, things like contemplation, things like breathing practices, and so much really now, as we keep searching and going deeper into science, it's all kind of linked and looped together.
Yeah, I definitely believe that that's true. I know that one of the only classes in college that I withdrew from, in fact, the only college class that I ever withdrew from, was on mindfulness. And
Mm.
I was taking 21 hours one semester, was an editor for the paper, and I had a night class, and I thought that mindfulness would be this really great thing. And I would show up, and it just, to sit still and be mindful was, I guess, too much to ask at the time. And I often think back to that and think, if only I would have stuck with it, because now I know that if I sit for even 5 minutes, I get so much more clarity. So talk to me about that. Share with me, what's the science telling us today?
Sure. Are you okay if we start with kind of what is success? I think, it's
Yes.
probably helpful to start with that definition, and because we all have our own thoughts. But what I like to point to is this really beautiful study that was done by palliative care nurses right before people were dying of a long life. So these were individuals who were dying of old age, and, they had long, productive lives. And these nurses decided to ask them, how do you define a successful life? This is at the end of the human experience. What would these people actually say? So I think often the answers, I say, are a bit of paradox. Like, they're so obvious, but they're also common sense, but they're also uncommon practice. So when you hear the answer, it's very common sense, but when you think about it, we actually don't practice living this way. So these individuals said the definition of a successful life is enough of everything that matters. So of course, a certain level of security or wealth and certain level of status is important to people, but very important to people is their health, their physical, their mental health, the health of their social networks, their family and friends, enough of joy, enough of passion, enough of self-expression and exploring that part of them that is very curious and very unique to them. So really, it's enough of everything that matters, or a balanced life, a life of balance. And that makes complete common sense to me, or I would assume you. Now, if we look around us, I don't know how many people are actually searching or designing or putting intention into a life like that. I'm sure that was the case for you back in college, but it sounds like you didn't have a lot of balance. And, now I see people, highly intelligent people, who are very clear that they want success, but who have forgotten the broad definition of that word. So I just wanted to kind of remember that really that's what we're going for here, is a life at the end of that life, at that moment, you feel that you have achieved all aspects of that word success. So I'm hoping that's what we're going to focus on today.
I hope so too. I mean, I can imagine that you sometimes get pushback from the type A personalities who are saying, can I afford to take the focus off of, say, financial success, or really being a striver to climb the corporate ladder? Will it mean that I'll be a failure, or a loser if I stop pushing so hard to achieve.
Right. Yeah. And I think this is very epidemic in our world. I love telling Arianna Huffington's story from her book, where she says she was a highly successful woman with all kinds of media. And she, I don't know where she was, in a hotel, whatever. She was exhausted and she fell and hit her head off on a coffee table or something. She was bleeding and tired and exhausted and cranky. And she's like, it just hit her. It's like, how am I successful? Even though she was, and everyone referenced her as a highly successful person. And even personally, to be honest, I have really experienced burnout myself in the pursuit of our very narrow definition of success that I think is ingrained in us. And it's really put a cost on my own health. And I'm someone who reads the science and understands it and actually writes books on it. So we're all prone to this very intense pressure to follow a narrow definition of success, which is career, status, or wealth. And so let's talk about the whole word of it. And we don't need to compromise happiness for financial health. We don't need to compromise our sense of passion and community for our career. We actually can achieve all of it, and that's the goal.
I love that. So let's go into that some more.
Right.
So what have you found as far as some of the surprising ways that maybe people don't expect that success would come to them more easily, or that they'd have a more balanced life? What are we missing?
So I think one of the surprises for many people, and it took me a while to fully understand this, is when we look at the neuroscience, we have focused a lot on the brain in our heads, which is great. And that's a very important set of neurons. But if we're really understanding the human being and how we work, we have to understand that we have many brains. We have a system of intelligence, and that is the human intelligence system. And if that system is working in an integrated, optimized way, then we are on the path for success, for our highest potential. And the thing that drives that system begins with very primal emotions, which are based and supported by the neurons in our gut. Okay, so we have neurons in our gut, we have neurons in our heart, and we have neurons in our brains. In our brains as in our head. So we actually have at least and today we'll just focus on those three areas of human intelligence that lie in our gut, our heart, and our head. And there's many others as well. You know, we have 140 sensory neurons in our hands, and that's why hands-on learning is so important. And that's why now in very competitive companies, we're seeing people building prototypes in using their hands and clay and plasticine and Lego, whatever, because, we have evolved over, 1.8 million years, and our intelligence is in our head and in our bodies. So let's start with the gut first. The neurons in our gut are highly specialized for very primal emotions of fear and safety. If that doesn't feel right, it's going to run the show. So for example, if we don't feel safe and secure, we are not going to be able to integrate any other neuro intelligence at all. So what things make us feel unsafe? Some really simple stuff. Sleep deprivation makes us feel unsafe. Dehydration makes us feel unsafe. Just being overtired makes us feel unsafe because our neurons don't know why we're sleep deprived or dehydrated or so tired. Being sedentary, sitting at a desk for hours at a time actually makes our neurons feel unsafe. The message that goes to our gut neurons and our whole system is, why are you sitting in a cave, looking at, not looking at a screen, not looking at human faces, being sleep deprived and exhausted Is there something wrong with your environment? Why aren't you moving and sleeping? Is there a hurricane? Is there a predator? What is happening? So
Right.
just our lifestyle of working too hard, not moving, not sleeping, and not taking care of ourselves with good nutrition and hydration will severely impact our success, because now we will fire stress, and that's all coming just from this basic idea of security and what we can feel in our gut. So I think when we understand that, we can understand why sleep, nutrition, hydration, movement are the basics of success.
Oh, I love that. I mean, recently I was looking at the subject of community. It's kind of a focus for me, and I was working with a client, and they deal with patients who have Parkinson's. So their dopamine levels are lower to nothing, right? And so they have a lack of motivation, and have really struggle with adhering to the therapies that they need to go to in order to survive, or at least extend their life expectancy. And as I was talking with them, I found that community was extremely important for them in adherence and like sticking to these therapies and showing up. And so when you were talking about being in the cave and looking at the screen rather than looking at other human faces, I thought about, this problem, not just for them, but for social isolation for all of us. And I mean, yeah, you would start to feel fearful. You'd start to feel nervous. You're definitely not working at an optimal level at that point.
Yes, absolutely. And that, I know you referenced the tech diet, but right now I'm working on my next book, which is about technology and screens and how it's impacting us in both positive and negative ways. And we're probably going to call it the tech solution. But what you just said really connects to the next level of human intelligence, which is the neurons in our heart. And people don't realize that we have a very important brain in our gut and also in our heart. And these are neurons that are specialized for our relationships, how we connect to each other, our sense of community, a sense of people around us. We are fundamentally social beings. And if our social connections aren't in the right order, our heart neurons are going to fire. And they're going to fire stress because, again, we evolved relying on each other for our fundamental survival. So we are social. And so, again, a key to success is to make sure your relationships are in order. And that doesn't mean you have to, love and be, wonderful with everyone. But it means that you have to be aware of those that may not be in order, find a way to manage them, whether it's setting boundaries or stepping back or talking it out. I always use this analogy of, jellyfish, dolphin, and shark. There's 3 interpersonal styles. Some relationships can become, you can become the jellyfish, meaning, you're just not, you don't have your own backbone or authority. You feel you're being taken advantage of. You don't feel you can speak up. You've kind of lost your structure, your integrity in that relationship. Other relationships, you can become the shark, meaning that you're overbearing. Maybe the other person is too permissive, and that's allowing you to be too controlling or micromanaging, and that's not good for anyone. Really, what you want in your relationships is this metaphor I call the dolphin. If you think of the animal, it's strong but flexible. So there's a firmness in who you are, but also flexibility for the other person. If you think of that, dolphins, they are moving forward, shoulder to shoulder together. So the relationship promotes growth and forward movement with this firm and flexible style. So in general, we know that that's very important because if the people around us, if we're not feeling good about it, we will fire adrenaline. It will distract us. Every person knows how maybe you're in the middle of a deadline or something really important, and someone says something to you at a board meeting or in the hallway, and instead of really focusing on what you need to do, you're obsessing about what they said, what they meant.
Yes.
Because we're fundamentally social. And socializing is not social bonding. We need a few good social bonds. So my request or my suggestion is to focus on a few good social bonds and a few healthy relationships, and and get your heart neurons in the right order.
So it's okay if I'm not the super extrovert that's going out, and I don't have to surround myself by, hundreds of people or even a dozen best girlfriends. It's okay if I just have two or three that I'm really good and have a heartfelt connection with.
Absolutely. Yeah. So socializing is not social bonding. Humans need social bonding. And the most important relationship, this is cliche, but all the cliches are true when you actually go through the neuroscience. Many of them are, is the most important relationship is that with yourself. So your own sense of identity, who you are, what your values are. So that comes first. And then we know that humans only need a handful of close bonds, social bonds. And in fact, we can only handle a community of around, depends on the person, but around 60 to 80 acquaintances. When we get too big, it becomes very stressful. So our extended community, whether it's your workplace or your school or your neighborhood, when we start trying to connect with hundreds and hundreds of, let's say, Facebook friends, that is stressful. So we don't need too many. And social media, in fact, has really created another layer of, in some ways, there's benefits to it. But the big drawback of social media, which now we understand, is our ability to compare. So comparing your life to someone else's on social media will release cortisol and put you in a stress mode, along with FOMO. So it's actually worse to, like, I don't know, drink alcohol. I mean, I don't want to drink Coke all day and junk food. It's actually worse for your body to compare your life on social media than to just pour junk food into your body.
Oh
it
my
is so toxic to
gosh, that's so sad. I am, so I'm taking, this is maybe a lot of information to share with everyone, but I am taking the year off from drinking alcohol. I decided, going into the year that I was going to take the year off. And it's been great for my skin. It's been great for all kinds of stuff. But here's the interesting thing I found. It has been, I think, so much easier than trying to create healthy boundaries with my phone, with my smartphone. So, I wanted to break myself of the habit of feeling like I had to have a drink going into social, engagements and stuff like that, or having one every night to unwind. And I kind of missed it. The habit was there, and breaking the habit was hard. But the phone, let's talk about this, because it's right here. It's always within reach. And I started keeping it in another room at night so that it would not even tempt me. Even if I woke up in the middle of the night delirious, it wouldn't tempt me. And I was doing really well. And then I have to tell you, one night I decided that I wanted, my excuse was that I was going to listen to these affirmations as I was going to go to sleep. And I wanted to listen to them through what? Through my phone. And now it's like I am binging. It's like I came back and I was on the phone way more than I was even before. And like, what happened?
I've heard so many stories like that, researching the Tech Solution book right now, and you're absolutely right. And I think what people don't understand is, or we're starting to understand better, is, this thing that looks really benign and, we put it in cute little cases, is extremely powerful. And in fact, there has been exhaustive research in the design of technology to really hook us from that dopamine perspective. Now, I'm an addiction psychiatrist. That's actually my background. That's what I've done for almost 20 years, is help people and do research on addiction. the currency of addiction, or the key neurochemical, is dopamine. That's what gives us reward, positive and in a positive and negative way. And we know that dopamine has been really purposely looked at and embedded in the design of a lot of the devices and platforms we use. Now, that's not all in like some dark, scary way. Some of it is designed, let's say, like, for Parkinson's disease, there's, there's an app that rewards people with dopamine every time, with like a little hit, like a little buzzer, a little smiley face. You collect coins. All of that is part of it. When they move, and when they walk 10 steps. So there's positive aspects, but by and large, we got to understand this is a consumer-based industry whose job it is to sell products, and that we, as the consumer, hasn't really fully understood the very powerful neuroscience that's been part of that. And there's never been a product in history that has had this kind of embedded neuroscience by researchers, and the latest kind of in it, and continually in it.
Yeah. Well, what is all of this doing for us, for us as humans, and things like trust, things like being able, because if we're supposed to build these relationships with other people and really look for meaningful relationships, something that's beyond the superficial, certainly we know that trust, like if we look at trust on the global level in institutions and religion and like all kinds of different types of institutions, organizations, even associations, that trust is lower and lower and lower. It's on the decline. How is something like this helping or hurting us when it comes to things like building trust and meaningful relationships with people? You'd think it'd help.
Well, I think, to be honest, everything has some kind of pros and cons. I think with the phone, you're right. You think it would help. And it has helped in some ways. It's helped connect people from across the globe. It's helped people really connect along certain topics, right? Like I work with a lot of people who tell me, you know what, I had never met, I didn't know how to deal with my transgender issue. And it was online that I found my community, and I figured out, what other people were doing. And I felt safe there first before real life. So there are definite benefits, let's say.
Yeah.
But what it's doing, to answer your question, is we know, and I did research at the World Health Organization many years ago, and at that time, the prediction for the #1 health epidemic of the 21st century, again, was a paradox. It was stress. So meaning it's, it's common sense, people feel stressed, but a bit of a paradox, like we've advanced so far in our society, and the #1 health epidemic is just our ability to manage our own lives. And we and I think part of the reason behind that is we as humans are the only species on the planet that can trigger that stress response, cortisol, based on our thoughts alone. So no other species can do that. A horse or a dolphin, whatever, they have to sense a predator or a hurricane or a food shortage in their environment physically. Whereas we can be sitting there having a lovely dinner in a beautiful house and think ourselves into stress. Yeah, and so what the WHO is now predicting as the #1 health epidemic of the next century is actually loneliness. So that's your point, is we are feeling less connected. That impacts our trust, and fundamentally that impacts our sense of loneliness. Now, people might be like, oh, I don't understand how loneliness is a health epidemic, and why was stress? But I always give the analogy that the most effective form of human torture is what? It's solitary confinement. Yeah.
Right.
So, loneliness or a sense of being alone will lead to anxiety symptoms, depression symptoms, eventually psychosis and actual self-mutilation. It's that bad for us. We are that social. So the phone, if it's removing us from real conversations, real people, real eye contact, real facial expressions, then it is an absolutely devastating thing for our lives. No exaggeration there. But if we're using it to connect in a positive way, to reach across and find community, then it is a wonderful thing.
Yeah. So maybe going back to my keeping it in the other room and figuring out another way to go to sleep with my affirmations would be a good idea on establishing healthy boundaries.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the quick metaphor I use for that is technology is like a diet, right? So if we look at Instagram, 1 hour of Instagram can be toxic if all you're doing is comparing your life to other people's, their vacations, their parties, their jobs. And 1 hour of Instagram could be like junk food, which is just mindlessly eating chips or pop. It's not good for us and potentially addicting, but a little bit of that, probably like junk food, won't kill us. And 1 hour of Instagram where you're reading affirmations could actually be healthy, like healthy food. So it's the diet of consumption of technology. Are you consuming healthy tech, junk tech, or toxic tech? And that's not, doesn't necessarily mean the platform. The platform can be the same platform. It's what you're choosing to consume.
I like it. I'm starting to see how this is all connecting, because what you're saying is we need to have awareness of how we're using it, right? And how do we build awareness in ourselves?
Right. Yeah. And just like the food we consume impacts our bodies, the technology we consume impacts our minds and bodies. So instead of looking at, number of hours or a specific thing, I think we now have to go deeper. This is part of our lives. Tech is forever embedded in the human lifestyle now. So now we need to understand, how are we consuming it, and what are we metabolizing it into? Are we metabolizing it into cortisol and stress hormones, which is what a lot of tech does? Or are we metabolizing it into feeling relaxed and uplifted, like affirmations, and that's endorphin and oxytocin. So it has the ability to do it all.
Well, let's talk about that, because one of my favorite points that you made was about play, the importance of play. And, for somebody who withdrew from a class that had to do with mindfulness, play falls in that category where it's like, ooh, I don't know if I have time for this. I don't know if I should spend time developing play. But you had some really good arguments for why someone who's thinking like that, maybe how I've thought about it in the past, should maybe reconsider. So can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so perfect. So now we're at our third brain, which is the brain in our head. Okay, so we've talked about the gut brain and how we need safety, security, basic lifestyle stuff. The heart brain, which is our relationships and our sense of identity and community. And then now, if those are kind of feeling good, now we can play. And play really is what gets our brain in our head going. Play is fundamentally how human beings learn. Let me define play for a moment. Play is actually a mindset of being comfortable with trying new things, learning from trial and error, learning from mistakes, healthy risk taking, being comfortable with the abstract, uncertainty. The best way to understand play, in my opinion, is perfectionism is the opposite of play. So we want to get away from perfectionism, which is wanting to not make mistakes, not learn through trial and error, and to actually play it safe and rigid. So that's what play is. And then some common things people think about with play are all the things kids do. And that, that's really healthy for kids, playing games and hide and seek and sandcastles and all of that. How adults can play is really apply that mindset to wherever they go. So if you're in a boardroom, be open-minded to the ideas, and just allow a play mindset and imagine, okay, even though I don't agree with this, I'm going to be open to it. Let me imagine what it would look like. So imagination is part of it. And when we look at other adult activities, I always say in the workplace, really bring in brainstorming. Brainstorming is a form of play. It's just being open and be wildly imaginative and be comfortable with mistakes in case you say something that everyone else thinks is silly. Who cares? Because the biggest innovations, the biggest breakthroughs often happen in these moments of where we are being comfortable and trying new and different things. So play is extremely powerful. It is how we adapt as humans, and it is how we innovate. I think it's really important now at this moment in time.
So what are some baby steps that people can take to get on this path? It's like, I don't know. I thought I had just one type of intelligence to deal with, and now I've got to worry about all my hands, my gut, my heart, my head, all of this stuff. Where do I even begin?
Right. Okay. So simple is not easy. You're going to hear all the same things that you've heard before. I say simple, and they're pretty simple, and knowing is not doing. So a lot of this you all know, but that doesn't mean you're doing it. Okay. But when we get to the doing, when we actually implement these very simple things that we all already know, now we can really optimize and get ourselves on that pathway to success. So first things, nobody plays when they're sleep deprived and exhausted, right? So and our gut neurons are going to fight. So number one, just basic self-care. Take care of yourself. Be aware of your emotional state, your physical body. So many of us skip breakfast. We just, we're not moving. It's a crisis. So we already cover that, but that in itself is a huge step forward. So that's the basics of life. Take care of them. Number two, mind your relationships, and I say watch your social diet. Okay, limit the toxic conversations. Be aware of the junk stuff, which is, it's a good conversation, but it really didn't add anything to my life. Maybe we need to grow in our relationships or with ourselves. And then now we're going to be in the right alignment to really play, meaning now we're going to feel comfortable with taking risks, with trying new things, with putting ourselves out there, because there's no success without some sense of growth, and there's no growth without some risk or pain. I always tell, I work with a lot of children through our Dolphin Kids programs, and I explain to them, when your body grows, it feels pain, right? We all had growing pains as teenagers. Well, when our mind grows, there's some pain there too. There's some nervousness, anxiety. I'm not sure about it. So the baby steps around play in particular, I would say, is really making a intention, a deliberate focus on trying new and different things. So if you're always the memo taker at a meeting, don't be the one who leads the meeting. If you're the one who's always leading the meeting, don't be the one that is doing the budget, let's say. So mix it up as much as you can. Mix up your friendships. The two keys to success, if we were to boil them down from a science point of view, are number one, adaptability, which I already talked about in terms of adapting to situations. But number two, diversity of the species. So it's survival of the fittest is adaptability, and diversity of the species is making sure that we are exposed to different thoughts. And that's just all play is.
I love talking to you. I absolutely I loved hearing the keynote when I heard you the first time. I loved the breakout and being able to ask questions. And now I could talk to you all day long. I have so many more directions I would like to go in, but I am very thankful to you for taking the time to talk to the audience and with me today. If people have questions, if they want to know more, if they want to reach out to you, where can they go?
Right. So I'm on social media everywhere. So I have my website, drshimikang.com. And through there, you can connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram or Twitter, whatever your platform is. I'm there. I have a lot of videos on YouTube as well, where I'm talking about different things. So yeah, and I love hearing from people. I love having direct questions. I love being challenged. So yeah, feel free to connect.
I have one more question for you, and that is because I know that you're always looking to grow and to branch out and to try new things. And this community association chat is really good about connecting people. And so, if there was a connection, if there was a group that you wanted to talk to, or something that you wanted to explore, how can people help you?
Right. Well, I think it would be great to, help me get the word out. And at the conference, I met a lot of heads of associations and communications people, and we exchanged some great ideas. I think doing what you're doing right now is wonderful. It helps me because I think this is not my message. I'm just giving the neuroscience. I'm just giving what I've my passion and what I've learned. And I just want people to know how they function, how they are hardwired, and spread that message because we really need it now. There is an urgency. There's a crisis of stress. There's a crisis of sedentary behavior. There's a crisis of mental health, loneliness, and all of it. But on the flip side, this is a massive opportunity for us as a species and community because our world has also never been so connected. And technology has actually allowed us into really use this new intelligence in a wonderful way. We don't have to memorize things anymore. All that's there on Google or on the internet. What we can do now is we can create, we can innovate, we can use our critical thinking skills, we can use our highest level of communication and collaboration to really move us all forward. So I think with associations, it's amazing work that's being done for many, many people, not just in the United States, but the American associations are a standard. They're a shining light for the rest of the world. And if we can get some of these messages integrated, then it can have a huge impact. And I'm absolutely happy to help.
I love it. Thank you so much for joining us. And for everyone who is watching this today, I want to remind you to keep asking questions to learn every day. As Joseph Campbell once said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.